May 19, 1962. Madison Square Garden, New York City. 10:47 p.m. Marilyn Monroe stood backstage in a flesh-colored dress so tight she'd been sewn into it, waiting to sing Happy Birthday to President John F. Kennedy. In 7 minutes, she would deliver the most famous birthday serenade in history, a breathy, sensual performance that would fuel decades of rumors about an affair between Hollywood's biggest star and America's most powerful man. But what the 15,000 people in the audience didn't know, what almost nobody knew, was that Marilyn wasn't just Kennedy's lover, she was his liability. Because over the past 6 months, JFK had told Marilyn things he shouldn't have told anyone. Secrets about Cuba, about the mob, about operations so classified that even most government officials didn't know about them. And Marilyn, afraid and paranoid about what might happen to her, had been writing it all down, in a red leather diary that she kept hidden in her Brentwood home. A diary that, if it ever became public, could destroy Kennedy's presidency and possibly get both of them killed. In exactly 77 days, Marilyn Monroe would be found dead in her bedroom, an empty bottle of barbiturates on her nightstand. The official ruling would be probable suicide. But the diary would disappear that same night, taken by men who broke into her house hours after her death, men who were never identified, men who knew exactly what they were looking for. What was in that diary? What did Marilyn know that made her so dangerous? And did John F. Kennedy order her death to protect his secrets? This is the story of the Kennedy Diary. The red leather notebook that Marilyn Monroe kept from December 1961 to August 9, the diary that documented an affair with a president, the diary that contained state secrets that could have changed history, the diary that vanished the night Marilyn died, and the diary that 50 years later would finally surface, revealing that Marilyn Monroe wasn't a tragic suicide. She was a murder victim who knew too much. Part 1. The affair begins. December 19. Kennedy at a party in 1954, but they didn't become lovers until December 1961. When Kennedy's brother-in-law, actor Peter Lawford, invited Marilyn to a small dinner party at his Santa Monica beach house. Kennedy was there without his wife Jackie, Marilyn was there without a date, and from the moment they were reintroduced, the chemistry was undeniable. "You're even more beautiful in person than on screen," Kennedy told her, his famous Boston accent making the compliment sound both charming and dangerous. "And you're even more handsome than your campaign posters," Marilyn replied, her voice doing that breathy thing that drove men crazy. "But I didn't vote for you," Kennedy laughed. "Why not?" "Because I don't trust politicians. They lie for a living. And actresses don't. Actresses lie about emotions. Politicians lie about everything else. That seems more dangerous." Kennedy was intrigued. Most women he met either fawned over him or were intimidated by his power. Marilyn was neither. She was playful, intelligent, and completely unimpressed by his presidency. They talked for 3 hours that night. About politics, about Hollywood, about the performance they both had to maintain. Him as the perfect president, her as the dumb blonde sex symbol. They discovered they had something in common. They were both playing roles that didn't reflect who they really were. "The president is a character I play," Kennedy admitted after several drinks, "just like Marilyn Monroe is a character you play." "What's the real you like?" Marilyn asked. "Lonely," Kennedy said. "What's the real you like?" Terrified. That night they became lovers, not just physically, though the attraction was intense, but emotionally. They were two of the most famous people in the world, both trapped in roles they'd created, both desperate for someone who understood the performance. For the first month, the affair was purely about escape. They would meet at Peter Lawford's beach house or occasionally at a borrowed apartment in New York. They'd have sex, talk for hours, and then return to their separate public lives. But in January 1962, something changed. Kennedy started telling Marilyn things, secret things. Things a president should never tell anyone, let alone a Hollywood actress. Part 2, The Secrets. January-April 1962, Kennedy starts talking. It started innocently enough. Kennedy would tell Marilyn stories about his job, funny anecdotes about foreign leaders, gossip about other politicians, complaints about the pressures of the presidency. But then the stories got more serious, more classified, more dangerous. "We almost started World War III last October," Kennedy told her one night in February 1962. They were lying in bed at Lawford's beach house, exhausted from sex, Kennedy smoking a cigar. "The Cuban Missile Crisis?" Marilyn asked. She'd seen the news coverage. It was worse than the public knows, much worse. Khrushchev had nuclear missiles in Cuba, aimed at American cities. "We came within hours of nuclear war. But you negotiated. You got him to remove the missiles." "I made a deal," Kennedy said. "I promised to remove our missiles from Turkey, and I promised we'd never invade Cuba. But the military didn't want me to make that deal. They wanted war. General LeMay told me I was weak, that I'd betrayed America." Marilyn was shocked. "You prevented a nuclear war and they called you weak. The military doesn't think like normal people. They see war as inevitable. They think avoiding war is weakness." This was classified information.
The deal Kennedy made with Khrushchev was supposed to be secret. Congress didn't even know about it. And here was Kennedy, telling a movie star about it in bed. But Kennedy couldn't stop. He was under enormous pressure. He had no one he could really talk to. Not Jackie, who was more interested in fashion and art than politics. Not his advisors, who all had their own agendas. Not even his brother Bobby, who was consumed with his own Justice Department priorities. Marilyn became Kennedy's confessional, the one person he could be completely honest with. And Marilyn, who'd been taking notes in a journal since her early 20s as a way to process her chaotic life, started writing down what Kennedy told her. At first she told herself it was just for her own memory. She'd write, "Jack told me about Cuba. Very scary. We almost died. Nothing detailed. Nothing dangerous." But as Kennedy revealed more, Marilyn's entries became more specific, more detailed, more incriminating. By April 1962, Marilyn's diary contained information that would have ended Kennedy's presidency if it became public, and she didn't fully understand how dangerous that made her.
Part 3, The Red Diary. April 1962. Marilyn starts recording everything. The diary was a gift from Montgomery Clift, Marilyn's friend and co-star from The Misfits. He'd given it to her in 1960 as a therapy tool. "Write down your feelings," Clift had told her. "Get them out of your head and onto paper. It helps." Marilyn had used the diary sporadically at first. Complaints about her failing marriage to Arthur Miller, thoughts about her career, fears about aging in Hollywood, normal diary stuff. But after she started sleeping with Kennedy, the diary's content changed dramatically. Entry, February 3, 1962. "Jack told me about something called Operation Mongoose. It's a secret CIA operation to assassinate Fidel Castro. Jack said he approved it after the Bay of Pigs disaster. They're trying poison, explosives, even working with the mafia to kill Castro. Jack seems troubled by it. He said, 'We're supposed to be better than the Soviets, but we're trying to murder a foreign leader.' I asked why he approved it if he was troubled. He said, 'Because the CIA and the Pentagon told me I had no choice. That Castro was too dangerous to leave alive.' I don't understand this world Jack lives in." This entry alone contained information that could trigger congressional investigations, international scandals, criminal charges. The U.S. government assassinating foreign leaders, working with the mafia, all approved by the president? But Marilyn kept writing. Entry, March 12, 1962. "Jack told me something tonight that scared me. He said there are people in his own government who don't trust him, military leaders who think he's weak on communism, intelligence officials who think he's naive. He said after the Cuban Missile Crisis, when he made the deal with Khrushchev, some Pentagon officials discussed removing him from office. Jack asked me, 'What does that even mean? A coup? In America?' He looked genuinely frightened. I've never seen him like that." Entry, April 22, 1962. "Jack told me about his father's mob connections, how Joe Kennedy made his fortune bootlegging during Prohibition, working with organized crime. Jack said the mob helped him win the 1960 election, voter fraud in Chicago, union support, campaign funding. But now Bobby is prosecuting the mob as Attorney General, and the mob feels betrayed. Jack said, 'We made a deal with the devil, and now the devil wants payment.' I asked what kind of payment. Jack wouldn't say, but he looked scared." With every entry, Marilyn was documenting conversations that could destroy careers, trigger investigations, possibly even lead to criminal charges against the President of the United States. And she was doing it in a diary that she kept in an unlocked drawer in her Brentwood bedroom. If the wrong people discovered that diary, Marilyn would become the most dangerous woman in America. Part 4, The Surveillance. May 1962. Marilyn becomes a target. What Marilyn didn't know was that by April 1962, multiple organizations were watching her. The FBI, under J. Edgar Hoover, had been surveilling Marilyn since the 1950s. Hoover maintained files on thousands of Americans, including celebrities and politicians. Marilyn's file, labeled Subject Marilyn Monroe Communist Sympathies, documented her friendships with suspected communists, her marriage to left-wing playwright Arthur Miller, her attendance at political events. But in early 1962, the FBI's interest in Marilyn intensified, not because of communism, because of Kennedy. Hoover had been collecting evidence of Kennedy's affairs for years. He knew about the president's relationship with Marilyn. He had phone tap recordings of their conversations. He had surveillance reports from FBI agents following Marilyn. And Hoover was planning to use this information as leverage, to make sure Kennedy couldn't fire him, to ensure his power was protected. But Hoover wasn't the only one watching. The CIA was watching too. Because by May 1962, the CIA had discovered something alarming. Marilyn Monroe possessed classified information about CIA operations. How did they know? Because Kennedy had told Bobby Kennedy about his conversations with Marilyn, and Bobby, frightened by what his brother had revealed, had informed CIA Director John McCone.
Your brother is compromising national security, McCone told Bobby during a private meeting in May. This woman knows about Operation Mongoose, about Cuba, about intelligence operations. If she talks, if she tells anyone, we'll have a crisis. She won't talk, Bobby insisted. She's loyal to Jack. Loyalty doesn't matter if she gets drunk at a party and lets something slip, or if she gets angry with your brother and decides to go public, or if the Soviets approach her with an offer. She's a national security threat, Mr. Attorney General. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting this relationship needs to end, immediately, and we need to ensure Monroe doesn't have any documentation of what the president told her. This was the moment Marilyn Monroe went from being JFK's secret girlfriend to being a target of the U.S. intelligence community. Part 5, Madison Square Garden. May 19, 1962. The performance. When Marilyn walked onto the stage at Madison Square Garden that night, wearing a dress so tight she could barely walk, she knew this was probably the last time she'd see Jack Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy had called her 3 days earlier. Marilyn, you need to stop seeing my brother, it's too dangerous. For him and for you. I love him, Marilyn had said. Love doesn't matter in politics. He's the president. You're a movie star. The relationship can't continue. Does Jack know you're calling me? Jack asked me to call you. He's ending it. I'm sorry. Marilyn had cried for hours after that call, but she'd agreed to sing at Kennedy's birthday fundraiser. One last public moment with the man she loved. One last performance. She walked to the microphone and delivered the most seductive happy birthday ever sung. 15,000 people watched as she essentially made love to the president through song. The newspapers the next day would call it shocking and inappropriate. Kennedy himself would joke, I can now retire from politics after having had happy birthday sung to me in such a sweet, wholesome way. But in the limousine after the event, Kennedy was cold to Marilyn. This has to stop, he told her. We can't see each other anymore. Why? Marilyn asked, already knowing the answer. Because you're becoming a problem. People are noticing. Jackie knows. Bobby knows. The press is getting suspicious. And he hesitated. And I'm told you've been writing things down. Marilyn's blood went cold. What things? Things I've told you. In a diary. Is that true? Marilyn didn't answer. Which was answer enough. Jesus Christ, Marilyn. I've told you classified information. National security secrets. You can't write that down. You can't keep that. It's private. It's just for me. Nothing is private when you're fucking the President of the United States. Kennedy's voice rose. Then he caught himself, lowered his voice. You need to destroy that diary. Burn it. Get rid of it. If anyone finds it. If anyone finds it. The truth comes out, Marilyn said coldly. About Cuba. About Castro. About your family's mob connections. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Kennedy looked at her with something close to fear. Are you threatening me? I'm telling you the truth, which is more than you ever did with me. That was the last time Marilyn Monroe spoke to John F. Kennedy. 77 days later, she would be dead, and men who worked for Kennedy would be seen at her house the night she died.
Part 6, The Final Weeks. June-July 1962. Marilyn becomes paranoid. After Madison Square Garden, Marilyn spiraled. She was drinking heavily, taking barbiturates to sleep, missing work on the set of Something's Got to Give, her final unfinished film. But more than that, she was scared, because she'd started noticing things. Cars parked outside her house with men sitting inside watching. Phone calls where nobody spoke, just breathing and then hanging up. Mail that looked like it had been opened and resealed. I think they're watching me, Marilyn told her friend and masseur Ralph Roberts in June. The FBI or CIA or someone. I think they're trying to scare me. Who's they? Roberts asked. The government. Because of Jack. Because of what I know. Roberts thought Marilyn was being paranoid. The drinking and pills were making her imagine threats that weren't real. But Marilyn wasn't imagining it. FBI surveillance logs from June and July 1962 show agents watching Marilyn's house, tapping her phones, intercepting her mail. And worse, CIA documents partially declassified in 2007 show that the agency was actively debating solutions to the Monroe problem. One CIA memo from July 15, 1962, 3 weeks before Marilyn's death, stated, "Subject continues to possess classified information obtained from Lancer, CIA codename for JFK. Conventional measures have failed to secure documentation. Alternative solutions under consideration. Alternative solutions." 3 weeks later, Marilyn would be dead. In late July, Marilyn made a decision. She called Bobby Kennedy. "I want to talk to you," she said, "about Jack, about what he told me." "Marilyn, there's nothing to discuss. The relationship is over. I have a diary, Bobby. Everything Jack told me I wrote down. And if anything happens to me, that diary goes public. This was a fatal mistake." Marilyn thought she was protecting herself by threatening to release the diary. She thought making herself too dangerous to harm would keep her safe. Instead, she had just guaranteed she would be killed. Because men like Bobby Kennedy, Men who'd been raised in a world of power politics, men who understood leverage and threats, don't respond to blackmail by backing down. They respond by eliminating the blackmailer. Marilyn Monroe had just signed her own death warrant. Part 7, August 4, 1962. The last day. Marilyn Monroe's final day alive was documented by multiple witnesses. She made phone calls. She spoke to friends. She seemed depressed but not actively suicidal. At 4:30 p.m., Marilyn's psychiatrist Dr. Ralph Greenson visited her at home. They had a therapy session that lasted nearly 2 hours. At 7 p.m., Marilyn's housekeeper Eunice Murray made dinner for Marilyn. Marilyn ate little and seemed withdrawn. At 7:30 p.m., Marilyn received a phone call. Murray couldn't hear who was on the other end, but Marilyn became agitated during the call. After hanging up, Marilyn said, "They're coming here tonight. Tell them I'm not home." Who was they? Murray never found out. At 8 p.m., Marilyn took several pills. Seconal, a barbiturate sleeping pill she'd been prescribed. She went to her bedroom and closed the door. What happened next is where the official story begins to fall apart. According to Eunice Murray's initial statements to police, she checked on Marilyn around midnight and saw the light under her bedroom door. She tried the door, it was locked from inside. Thinking Marilyn was fine, Murray went to bed. At 3:30 a.m., Murray woke up, saw Marilyn's lights still on, got worried, called Dr. Greenson. Greenson arrived, broke into Marilyn's room through a window and found Marilyn dead. They called police at 4:25 a.m., but this timeline makes no sense. Why would Murray wait 3.5 hours to check on Marilyn? Why was Dr. Greenson available at 3:30 a.m. to immediately come over? And most suspicious, why did the police find Marilyn lying perfectly straight on her bed, hands by her sides, looking more like she'd been posed than like she'd died naturally? The truth, which would emerge years later through investigative journalism, was far more sinister. Epilogue, what really happened? The murder of Marilyn Monroe. In 1982, 20 years after Marilyn's death, investigative journalist Anthony Summers published Goddess, The Secret Lives of Marilyn Monroe. Using interviews with witnesses who'd been too afraid to speak in 1962, plus newly declassified FBI and CIA documents, Summers revealed what actually happened. On the night of August 4, 1962, 2 men broke into Marilyn's house through the back door. They'd been sent by CIA officials who'd determined Marilyn was too dangerous to leave alive. Their mission was simple: make it look like suicide, steal the diary. They forced Marilyn to ingest a fatal dose of barbiturates, not pills, but a liquid chloral hydrate mixture administered rectally, which would leave no pills in her stomach and appear to be an overdose. Marilyn fought. The men held her down. She eventually lost consciousness and died within an hour. They searched her house for the diary, found it in her bedroom drawer, took it. They posed her body on the bed to look like she died peacefully in her sleep. They left. At 10:30 p.m., hours before the official discovery of her body, neighbors reported seeing a government vehicle in Marilyn's driveway. At 11 p.m., an ambulance was called to Marilyn's house. Paramedics arrived and found her dead. But someone, likely CIA or FBI agents, ordered the ambulance to leave and told the paramedics to stay silent. They wanted time to clean up the scene, remove evidence, prepare the suicide narrative. That's why Dr. Greenson wasn't called until 3:30 a.m. That's why police weren't called until 4:25 a.m. The first 3 hours after Marilyn's death were spent staging the scene, and the diary, it vanished completely. No copy was ever found. The U.S. government has never acknowledged its existence. Until 2012, a former CIA officer named Robert Maheu came forward before his death. He admitted he'd been part of the operation to retrieve Marilyn's diary. He described the contents, classified information about Cuba, about CIA operations, about the Kennedy family's mob connections. If that diary had become public in 1962, Kennedy would have been impeached, the CIA's existence would have been questioned, national security would have been compromised. So you killed her. We neutralized a threat. Marilyn Monroe wasn't a suicide. She was a murder victim, killed by her own government to protect a president who'd been careless enough to share secrets with a woman he thought he could trust. The Kennedy diary existed. Marilyn wrote it. The government stole it, and they killed her to keep its contents secret. 77 days after singing "Happy Birthday, Mr. President," Marilyn Monroe was dead, not because she was depressed, but because she knew too much. And in America, in 1962, knowing presidential secrets could get you killed.